include your outlet and your name, and we'll get to them at the end of the statements. Over to you, Bahar.
Hi, thank you. Been in a lot of sort of kangaroo judicial proceedings in Guantanamo and Israeli military courts, and this was equally disgraceful. Felt to me like a Soviet-style show trial, just a charade where the only thing authentic was the judge wearing a robe. Uh, the judge had made up her mind in advance and simply read from a pre-written statement. Judge didn't care about the Constitution, didn't care about legal process, didn't care about fairness to Mahmoud or the lawyers, and didn't care about the validity of the evidence, and simply agreed that if a government official, an executive official, says so, I will agree, the judge. That's not law. That's a kind of chintzy authoritarianism. And ultimately, what the judge's acceptance of the Rubio determination without any scrutiny whatsoever, what that means is that the Secretary of State can arrest, detain, deport anyone simply for disagreeing with U.S. foreign policy positions. In this case, the U.S. support for the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the mass slaughter of civilians there. And it's a lawless and scary position that, as Johnny says, has no limitation, no end, which is why it's also essential that we have federal court review of the kind that we've requested from the federal court in New Jersey, because a federal court, unlike this court, does not, in our system of separation of powers, does not simply accept the word, the say-so of an executive official as if it is law, and a federal court will ensure that an executive official cannot take action that directly violates the Constitution, namely the First Amendment and the Due Process Clause. And someone asked how Mahmoud is doing. If I could share the statement that he made at the end of the hearing that reflects his poise, his steely dignity, and his concern for others. He said to the court, I'm quoting, "I would like to quote what you said last time, that there's nothing that's more important to this court than my due process rights and fundamental fairness. Clearly, what we witnessed today, neither of these principles were present or in this whole process. This is exactly why the Trump administration has sent me to this court 1,000 miles away from my home." He concludes, "I just hope that the urgency you deem fit for me is afforded to the hundreds of others who have been here without a hearing." Thank you. Amy?
So I'm seeing some questions about process before the federal court. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview, which is that we have several motions still pending before the federal court, seeking Mahmoud's release, seeking that the court enjoin the unlawful attempts by the government to retaliate against Mahmoud. And those are pending. The judge is considering them. And we can talk specifically about next steps there, but just to take a step back, what happened in immigration court today only confirms the need for the federal court to really intervene and make a decision in this case, because the immigration court made clear today that it won't and believes it can't. But in any event, the sole basis of his removal is for his speech. We saw today that the immigration judge confirmed that the Rubio determination, the 2-page letter that Mark was referencing, is the only basis. The judge wouldn't consider other evidence. And that it says on that letter very clearly that the government has targeted him for his speech and his beliefs. This is retaliatory in violation of the First Amendment and was also made pursuant to a broader policy of targeting non-citizens like Mahmoud who engage in speech that the government doesn't like. And we've seen now numerous cases of students and other people targeted under this policy. Because the policy expressly discriminates against one viewpoint, one side of the debate here, that also violates the First Amendment. The policy is also so vague that no one is really on notice of what type of speech might get them ripped from their lives in the US and summarily deported. Is resharing a post on social media enough? Is attending a protest enough? No one knows, and due process requires more than that. And then finally, the Rubio determination is really the only basis that the government has proffered for Mahmoud's detention. But the government is not permitted to detain people for their beliefs. And the government here hasn't even attempted to say that he is any kind of a flight risk or a danger to the community. Of course, he's not. But every minute that he is incarcerated without any type of justification is a violation of his due process rights as well. And I will leave it at that for questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. All right, we're going to start with a question from the New York Daily News. Can you explain what happened at the second hearing today with Fabiars and how/whether Mahmoud is protected from deportation by, I'm totally butchering this judge's name, so I apologize, Fabiars' previous order that he not be removed?
So he asked us what happened in court, bottom line. So I spoke on behalf of our legal team, and the U.S. attorney spoke on behalf of the government. We made clear to Judge Fabiars that the immigration court basically denied everything. They presented their evidence 2 days ago for the first time. We had to respond, and there was 2 days ago was the first time we actually saw what Marco Rubio wrote, even though we asked this a month ago and they hadn't given it to us. And we said we explained to the district court judge, Judge Fabiars, that we had asked the immigration judge for the right to cross-examine the Secretary of State, to depose him, to look at the documents that he attached by DHA, Department of Homeland Security, and that we asked to be able to explore the basis of his claiming that this is really important to the United States, so important that they'll violate someone's First Amendment protected activities and say they have to be deported from the United States because of their beliefs, statements, or associations. And we explained to him that the immigration judge denied every single motion. She refused to grant us continuance. She had given us 48 hours total to prepare for the hearing in this case. And she would not allow any discovery about the basis for Rubio's assertions. We had explained to the district court that the statute says, the immigration statute says that the government has to establish reasonable grounds for asserting that his presence in the United States was contrary to U.S. foreign policy interests, and we had a right to explore that, and the judge had a duty to decide that, and she said absolutely not. So it was a sham. It was a kangaroo court. That was clear, and I think Judge Fabiars got that impression, to be quite honest. Maybe not that it was a kangaroo court. That was my opinion, but I think that he understood that there was really no due process in that proceeding, and that we weren't going to be able to develop the record.
Appreciate that so much, Mark. We're going to go to CNN's question now. What is the legal team's focus now as this appears to be stuck in a jurisdictional tug of war? How confident are you that the judge will consider the motion to release Khalil?
So the judge has already ruled in the federal court in New Jersey that it has jurisdiction over these claims. So currently there is no tug of war happening about where his federal claims can be heard. And we are proceeding in front of that court on those claims. And so we're very confident that the judge is currently considering our motions, and in the very short hearing we had today, he indicated that he would be ruling on them, hopefully very soon.
Great. We're going to go to Al Jazeera, who asked, does today's ruling set a legal precedent for similar deportation cases? Does it imply that the State Department is no longer required to provide evidence of any accusations and can instead rely solely on the Secretary's determination? I don't know who's maybe
Um,
Bahar or Mark.
yeah, that's what the government's position was, and that's what the judge ruled. And that's their position. That was the government's position. That was the judge's position. That can't go behind it. If Marco Rubio says he should be deported, end of the inquiry. So that's their position. We'll be arguing in district court that can't happen. It's violative of the First Amendment, and we'll argue it wherever we can. But that's their legal position that they are taking in this case.
And just to add to that, it's the legal position they're taking in this case. And if the courts ultimately sanction it, the point is, as others have identified, there's no stopping at Mahmoud Khalil. There's no stopping at plainly just pro-Palestinian protesters. Next, it could be LGBTQI activists under some pretext that interferes with our foreign relations with Russia, racial justice activists. Anyone. So that's the problem with diktats. If the authoritarians would like to use them over and over and over again, and the point is courts need to stop them.
Can I just clarify one thing on my previous answer about the tug of war? Because I think I misunderstood that the question was actually about the jurisdictional arguments the government's raised in response to our current motions pending before the federal court. The judge does still need to rule on those. The government has argued there that the federal court has no jurisdiction over these claims because they have to be raised in immigration court. But what we saw today is the immigration court very clearly saying we can't and we won't. So we have very strong arguments that this court is really the only appropriate court for these constitutional claims, and we're waiting a decision on that.
Thanks so much. The next question is from Law 360. What did the judge say about the reasoning? Did she make any statements about the sufficiency of Rubio's memo?
Yeah, she said that, so long as there exists a memo, she can't question whether there's any explanation in the letter at all. This 2-page undated memo provides no factual recitation, makes extremely broad claims about Mahmoud's presence in the United States. And it seems like Rubio didn't actually make the determination himself. It appears that ICE HSI conducted an investigation and sort of teed it up for him, and he just signed a piece of paper. We raised all of these arguments, including the fact that Rubio needed to notify congressional committees that he had made this determination, and there was no evidence that he's done that. And the judge just told us it's too bad. She's not going to look at it. She has no authority to look at it. And again, the mere existence of those 2 pieces of paper is sufficient to take away someone's green card and to deport them away from their pregnant U.S. citizen wife and their soon-to-be-born U.S. citizen son.
Thank you so much, Mark. We're going to go to a simple question from Reuters on when will/can you go to the Board of Immigration Appeals on today's ruling? And actually, now that I know immigration court even a little bit, maybe that's actually not a simple question, but I will hand it over to the immigration lawyers for that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Judge.
No, please.
Okay. So we can go to the Board of Immigration Appeals, but not till there's what's called a final order. So we're still have this, I'd say, secondary or tertiary matters to deal with in the immigration court. But my guess is she'll be making a decision, within a few weeks or so on the other matters, which really won't control the case. And then we would go to the Board of Immigration Appeals. But the Board of Immigration Appeals has precedent, which is what the judge relied on, and the government was arguing. Basically, similarly saying you can't look behind the uh, two-page letter or any memorandum that the Secretary of State puts out about this. So our real remedy is in district court, in federal district court, and that's the only place we're going to get any real justice, or that he is going to get any real justice.
Thanks so much. All right, we're going to take, I think, about two more questions. One from NBC. What type of relief are you seeking, and will you apply for asylum on behalf of Mr. Khalil?
Yeah, we're in the process of discussing various forms of relief. There has been a discussion about filing for asylum. And as I mentioned earlier, on April 23rd, we're supposed to file additional evidence and any applications for relief that we'll be pursuing. And at that point, there'll be a subsequent hearing or more scheduled for the presentation of those claims.
And I would just add that the government's charges in this case, uh, ironically, may present him with a viable claim for asylum, because he's being, you know, pilloried throughout, all the documents that are being filed, and the accusations about him. So, we haven't discussed this fully because we did not think we were going to finish the case today. We asked for continuance to present evidence, to cross-examine the Secretary of State, etc. She denied every single motion. And so now we have to consider the relief and whether he'll apply for asylum or anything else.
Thank you so much. All right, we have one question from Katrina Kaufman of today. There was an interim final rule issued that reduces the size of the Board of Immigration Appeals. Do you have any comment on that? And could it have any impact on Mr. Khalil's and similar cases?
I have various comments and thoughts on that. The Board of Immigration Appeals historically has taken forever. I'm talking about years to decide appeals. When someone is detained and you file an appeal of bond, they take months or longer. And this is with a board that had twice as many members as it has now. So any reduction in the Board of Immigration Appeals is just going to further slow down the process, deny justice to people who have legitimate claims in the United States. I think it will encourage judges like the one in Mahmoud's case and DHS attorneys like the ones in Mahmoud's case to do things that are unlawful, knowing that recourse is even more limited than it was before.
Yeah, and I would add one thing. We saw this, a few decades ago, when John Ashcroft was in charge of the he was Attorney General and therefore in charge of the Board of Immigration Appeals. What the Trump administration is doing is similar to what he did. They're getting rid of anybody they think might rule against the government. We have several people who have been fired from the Board of Immigration Appeals by the administration. They're putting in their handpicked people who will rule the way they want them to rule. There's basically going to be no justice in the immigration court system based on what we're seeing now.
Thank you so much for that answer, Mark. We're going to go to the last question from the Columbia Spectator. What does the continuation of Khalil's deportation proceedings mean to his wife, family, and friends?
John, do you want to take that?
Yeah. I think as Amy mentioned, every day that he remains detained is another day that he suffers irreparable harm. He's missing his wife in the last stage of her pregnancy when she needs him most. He is at risk of missing the birth of his first child. And his community and the students at Columbia and the faculty that benefited from his thoughtfulness and intelligence and diplomatic demeanor are being deprived of access to a wonderful human being. And as he said in court today, there's no mistake. There was no accident in him being sent to Louisiana. It is a place far removed from most of society where it's difficult to get news from. it's difficult to find an attorney. And, just like his arrest was meant to silence him and intimidate him to be quiet, sticking him in the middle of the South with very little access to people, technology, etc., is just a further attempt to chill him.
Thanks. Bahar, do you have any
Yeah. And
last
not to
remarks?
mention that,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, they're form shopping. They send these people to places in Texas or Louisiana because they think the courts of appeals, where the appellate process goes, is more favorable to them. So if he has to appeal through a federal courts, eventually it'll likely be in the Fifth Circuit, where the government obviously thinks they have a better shot than in the Third Circuit or the Second Circuit. And so it's form shopping, plain and simple, that the government's doing in this case.
Thanks so much. I think with that, unless any of our amazing panelists have any last remarks, we will close this press conference with a thank you all to the panelists for joining, for the reporters for joining at such a late hour. And we look forward to continuing to speak with you all in Mahmoud's continuing fight for justice. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellie.
Okay.